during times of a national health crisis. Choices that favor the health and well-being of all citizens over freedom to assemble one's faith must take priority.
Religious leaders need to be creative in meeting the spiritual needs of their congregation during this pandemic.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome to the American Religious Town Hall meeting. It's our privilege to be here today to discuss important topics, and you'll notice that because of the quarantine and the pandemics that things have changed a little bit. I'm not Pastor Lutz, I'm James Weingartner, and we have a limited number of panelists to give us more social distancing, and we're calling this few and far between today. So we're happy you're here, and we want to introduce your panelists to you today, and we'll begin with Bishop Olson.
My name is Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Roman Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I'm the Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
We're glad that you're here for this important subject. Today our subject is worship style and wellness. As the COVID-19 crisis deepened, many rules and mandates were enacted by government leaders across the United States. One of those involved social distancing. While most Americans felt the pinch introduced by that mandate, most agreed that there was wisdom in keeping their distance from one another. When government leaders limited groups to 10 people or less, it came into conflict with First Amendment rights of freedom of assembly and the free exercise of religion. In most cases, religious leaders conformed to the requests from government, changing the ways that they offered worship and discipleship opportunities to their members. There were those, however, such as Pastor Tony Spell in Baton Rouge, who gathered 1,800 of his people for worship together and refused to close down his church in favor of the health crisis, arguing that such crises, more than ever, people need hope and the strength that their religious faith offers. We would like to ask our panelists to consider the following questions. 1, should churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples be exempt from the stay-at-home mandates imposed by government leaders? 2, should those who refuse to conform to such governmental mandates be punished or for disobeying the stay-at-home mandate? And 3, what longer-term risks to the First Amendment do you see regarding the ongoing spiritual health and life of churches, synagogues, and mosques when limited by such government actions? We'll begin the discussion today with Canon John Peterson.
Thank you. A few weeks ago on the American Religious Town Hall, I started my reflection with an appropriate quote from Alan Cross, a Southern Baptist pastor from California. As I thought about and reflected on this moderator's statement today, I think that Pastor Cross's words are once again very appropriate. I quote, "Pastors who ignore the coronavirus restrictions grab headlines. But most pastors are being very careful about worship during the pandemic." His words need to be heeded. As the moderator pointed out in his statement, Tony Spell refused to go close down his Life Tabernacle Church in April, May, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. But listen to this chronology. He was arrested and put under house arrest, but the next day, on the 26th of April, he violated his house arrest. During that service, he said to his congregation, "God gave you an immune system to kill the virus." And then he went on to say, "I am not going to hinder the virus." What is interesting, when one looks at the CDC reports of the new cases of deaths caused by the coronavirus, the statistics show that on April 26th in Baton Rouge, the Sunday that Spell violated his house arrest and went to the church, there were in Baton Rouge 1,700 cases of COVID-19 reported in Baton Rouge. 17 days later, on May 10th, the number of COVID-19 reported cases in Baton Rouge were 3,100. In other words, during that period of time, 1,400 new COVID-19 cases were reported. Now, what I'm not saying is that any of the 1,400 new cases came as a result of the worship that Sunday morning at the Life Tabernacle Church. But we do not know that because the state of Louisiana does not have any tracking. And so it would be impossible to secure that type of information. But what I am saying is our body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, which we have from God. And I would also want to go so far as to say it is sheer ridiculousness in the time of a pandemic not to shelter in place and practice social distancing as ordered by the state.
Dr. Matthews.
Yes, I appreciate Canon Peterson's comments. And my opening comments state religious leaders need to be creative in meeting the needs, the spiritual needs of their congregations during the pandemic. I would not categorize this pastor as one who was creative. I think that, and this was early on when the pandemic first hit and numbers were rising. I think it's really not beneficial for this pastor to have his congregation out in such great numbers. And then, of course, as Canon Peterson mentioned, I didn't know he made the comment about the immune system, that God gave us an immune system. I think that is absolutely underwhelming to fight the virus. Faith and wisdom are not mutually exclusive. And this is personal to me on many levels, because I pastor a member who contacted me on a Thursday, very upset because this member lost her brother that day. And the next day, she lost her dad in Baton Rouge. This was in Baton Rouge. So we know people are dying. We know the virus is real. And we know that the CDC has given us guidelines to protect ourselves and our fellow citizens. And I think this pastor could have done what most pastors did in the United States and move your services online and stream, Zoom, and safeguard his congregation. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to check and see if anyone in his church contracted the virus. I don't know if anyone is aware of that, and not only contracted it, but did anyone subsequent to him coming out, did anyone pass away in his congregation? I don't know.
In the reports that I read, there's one reported coming out, but it is not he denies that it had anything to do with his opening the church.
Yeah, yeah. Well, to the question, should those who refuse to conform to such governmental mandates be punished? I don't think they should be arrested, but maybe fined. I think arresting people may be an overreach, and of course we have some situations across the U.S. where we have seen a few arrested, but I'll say more about that later.
Rabbi Levin?
So I think beyond what this particular pastor in Baton Rouge decided to do is the larger question of where is the role of religious organizations in a free society? And to me, the whole enterprise of religion, whether it's Jewish tradition, Christian tradition, Catholic tradition, Muslim tradition, any of the traditions, is to amplify holiness in the world and to bring people closer to a relationship with God. And so whenever we think about what it is a religious organization is going to do, they have to ask themselves, are they advancing that? Or are you advancing your own sense of need for power or approbation, or is this falling into even a place of hubris? And I think that one of the things that we always have to balance is what do we need to do for the real things that he identified? People do need the resources of faith. They do need the resources of community, but religious organizations have to provide that in a manner that does not impinge on public safety. And in the Talmud, there is a Jewish legal prescription that says in Aramaic, Dina de Malchuta Dina, which means the law of the land is the law. That if there is a case where you have a religious prescription and then the law of the land supersedes that, in most cases, you follow the law of the land. And the idea being that the law of the land is there for the general safety and prosperity of the community as opposed to the limited interests of one particular segment of that community. And so I also worry about what it means when we do things as religious leaders that put stumbling blocks before the blind and draw people into places where they can get hurt. There was a church in Frankfurt, Germany, that in May tried to do a service where there would be proper social distancing. And even at that service, where they tried to put public safety measures in place, there were over 107 cases of transmission of COVID from that one worship service. Wow. And so when we think about what the impact can be of just one unfortunate congregating act, I think we have to be very, very careful that we're looking at the role of life and caring for the members of our communities to ensure that they are able to live their lives with the most holiness, which includes protecting their physical being.
Bishop Olson?
Oh, I think this is a very good conversation. Hearing John's presentation and the story of this pastor in Louisiana, I don't share his theology, and I mean, there's one truth, and we are able to understand it, come to it, be mystified by it. It's sometimes through faith and through reason. And in the past experience in dealing with the responsibility to worship God and to worship Him well and as safely as possible, safeguarding the care of our parishioners, one of the challenges that I've faced is in some ways exercising sort of a teachable moment among other people of goodwill who immediately just say to us, well, you can do everything online. Why don't you do confession by online? And I said, because we can't. All right? I mean, Mass is the essential way we worship God. All right? And to say that you can just easily transfer it to online is not just a matter of inconvenience. It's a matter of, no, it's not in keeping with our faith. Now, we did what we were able to do, but to suggest that we're not impoverished by that is insensitivity to my faith tradition. All right, now, we responsibly did what we can as safely as possible. We pulled back, we shut down precisely when we didn't know more about the virus, but as things in keeping with our society started opening up more, we were right there. I think as a people and as a government in the last several months, freedom of religion is not the only First Amendment right that we've had to balance against COVID. The right to assembly for protesters, I mean, who've been exempt from arrest because of the importance of freedom of speech. And have not been following social distancing, and the ramifications of that are also grave. I mean, the pandemic knows no boundaries and knows no rights. I mean, it affects everyone. There were other places that were allowed to open. In San Francisco, they maintained the bathhouses because that's an important part of gay culture and essential. Well, it's more essential than religion. I think we as religious people do have to exercise our rights well and responsibly, but especially when we can be easily overlooked as just somebody's private interest or entertainment form, which I believe we're not, and I don't think you have to be a Catholic to accept that either. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I well said. I think with this pastor, I think the challenge I have is this was going on when most of the country was experiencing, they were being hit hard with the COVID. And I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to do the best we can to lead by example as well. And I think to know that there were measures put in place, recommendations for churches to physically distance, and if businesses are closed, if other churches are shut down, to go out in that large of an amount of numbers is just something about that is just. I don't know if he's trying to make a point, or if he was trying to make a point, or if it's just rebellion. And I think the concern that government is infringing upon our rights to gather for worship, that's a legitimate concern. But I don't know if I would categorize this situation here as in that.
Rabbi Levin.
I think one of the challenges when pastors and others do things like this is that it makes it much harder for us to work with people who are already skeptical about religious enterprise to begin with. And when you see folks in the name of religion demonizing science, yes, or demonizing the government as an adversary, and a way of saying, in the name of religion, I can do this thing, even if it endangers other people, even if it contradicts everything that we've been told by experts is going to be a denigrating factor to health and to safety and wellness. What happens is that religion ends up looking bad. And I have a harder time trying to get my skeptical people in my community to embrace religion because they say, well, if that's what religion is, I don't want any part of it. And so I feel like the best thing that religious organizations can do to promote the exercise of religion is to partner with the government, to partner with civic leaders so that we are part of an organic solution together in facing challenges, as opposed to waving our flag and saying in the name of the First Amendment we can do whatever we want.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that people... what this has taught, at least taught me or reminded me, I guess, more than taught it, is that most people have goodwill, all right? And we want to find solutions, that care for the most amount of people and also, frankly, allow for the worship of God as we're able to do so in the safest way possible. But also, I think it's incumbent upon religious leadership to be willing to have a part of that conversation, either on the one hand, not just make a list of demands, or on the other extreme, just abandon our responsibility entirely to the government, either, or any other area. And I think that's, anyway, I think that's very important for our practice of our faith responsibly and worshiping God and serving our neighbor.
Ken Peterson?
I do think that most churches have been particularly responsive to the CDC guidelines. That's been a critical tool that the church, the synagogue, and the mosque has used in relationship to opening, closing, when we should be open, etc. So we have had good guidelines from the CDC to be able to worship, and particularly in larger populated areas where it's just simply not possible or feasible at this moment to open. The CDC has been very helpful in enabling that to be a very fair and open-minded process.
Very good. Thank you, panelists. Let's now look to a message from our sponsor.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching.
Thanks to the Town Hall Estates and all of their work that they do in this regard. And we're back at the American Religious Town Hall meeting, and it's time for our summary closing statements. Bishop?
The exercise of the practice of our faith and the worship that our faiths require always requires on us as well a sense of responsibility in safeguarding the people who are entrusted to our care. There's always a public dimension of worship and also the practice of our religion, which includes outreach, which includes prophetic witness, and it includes also caring for the sick and the infirm.
Canon?
Thank you. For me, the issue is not the First Amendment and the freedom to be able to assemble. That's not the issue. Instead, the issue is being responsible as a member in our community at a time of a pandemic. Life Tabernacle Church has a right to assemble when we are in normal times. No one would ever question that. That's not the issue. But in a pandemic, when thousands of people are dying every single day, it is not responsible for a minister of Jesus Christ and for the church to disobey the recommendations of public health that the state is trying to implement. I would go so far as to say it's really unchristian to go out and to potentially harm the community. The church is about health. The church is about community and living together in prosperity as well as in health.
Doctor?
Yes, I think that if we are, as we've seen, in a pandemic and every church is sheltering in place, I think it's reasonable and realistic for all churches to do that. I am concerned, as other folks are, with government overreach. Typically, if you give a mouse a cookie, it's going to want a glass of milk. I don't think this is the case with the government. I think this is an unprecedented time, and I think we're going to be okay.
Rabbi?
So the First Amendment that I know that all of us hold so dear, that allows us to have the free exercise of our religion, is the First Amendment to a Constitution whose preamble begins, "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union." And I think one of the things that we've lost sight of so much in our fractured society is that notion of union, that we need to look at those who are part of our government offices, those who are part of civic organizations, those who are part of the religious establishment. We need to look at each other not as adversaries, but as partners, not as those who are trying to infringe on our liberty, but more importantly, we need to look at those as our allies in trying to fashion a more perfect union. And when individuals or organizations say, well, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it, and I don't really care what the impact is on the larger culture or society or community in which I live, then I find myself, I think, losing that sense of a more perfect union. And so when I think about something I shared a few weeks ago on this program, that in the book of Leviticus, it says that you should observe all these precepts that you may live by them. And the Talmud comes out later and says, yeah, live by them, not die by them. So we need to remember that the exercise of religious liberty is to accentuate life and to bring holiness to the experience of life and to bring God's presence and light into a darkened world. When we're not doing that, then we're in trouble.
Thank you for your comments. We are living in a world that is full of people who want to become polarized against each other. And it's really gratifying to hear the members of our clergy and our religious and worshipful experiences here to speak together in unanimity, in confidence, and in union. And we appreciate very much what you've just said. We have I think as churches, we have a duty to guard against radicalization and it seems the pull in our culture to become really, really polarized and even violent. So let's work together for union. And I think that this broadcast is exactly that sort of experience of responsibly laying out freedoms in front of people so that we can do this. We want you to be a part of the conversation. You heard earlier in the program the addresses, and you'll see them again. We'd love for you to take part in this conversation. Write us and be a part of this experience, because the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and agree and guarantee that American right to all who appear here, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world could see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. Now, friends, until next week, at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.